trying to interfere in our election. But they're not the only ones. We take an oath trying to interfere in our election. But they're not the only ones. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies.
Hey all, if you're just joining us, we're ready to get this. We're going to be getting the stream started in a little bit here. We're just waiting for a couple things, and it'll be coming on soon. So hang in there. Let us know on the chat if let us know you're here, and we will be starting very soon.
Commander-in-Chief. It's more than just a job. Since taking office, President Donald
As we're waiting to start the podcast, we're going to be a bit delayed. It'll start around 4 o'clock. Around that time, we'll let you know. We'll keep you advised. We are going to do it today, but it's going to be later on due to a couple technical difficulties. But in the meantime, we're going to post live coverage of Hurricane Laura, which is now considered a catastrophic hurricane hitting the coast of Louisiana and Texas. So stay tuned for the podcast and enjoy the live coverage of Laura.
5 easy minutes, 100% natural looking results. Try Just for Men shampoo in color to restore your original shade.
I remember being hungry, having to hold my mom while she cried, hearing gunshots at night.
That American diplomats do not participate in political conventions. Speaking from the site of an official trip to Jerusalem.
President Trump has put his America First vision into action. It may not have made him popular in every foreign capital, but it's worked.
The State Department insists Pompeo's partisan speech highlighting the president's policies was delivered in his personal capacity. President Trump also showcasing his pardon power, granting clemency to a convicted bank robber who founded a program that helps former inmates.
As I grant John, I'm not sure you know this, a full pardon.
And hosting a recorded naturalization ceremony for the primetime audience.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And helping celebrate their father, two of the president's children.
As a recent graduate, I can relate to so many of you who might be looking for a job. My father built a thriving economy once, and believe me, he will do it again.
I'd like to speak directly to my father. I miss working alongside you every single day, but I'm damn proud to be on the front lines of this fight.
Eric Trump's message to his father last night. The First Lady's speech also drawing attention for the lack of social distancing in the Rose Garden and very limited mask wearing. At least some of those there were tested for the virus before attending, but the setup really seemed to minimize the threat of the pandemic. The president's top economic advisor earlier in the night even referring to it in the past tense. Savannah.
All right, Peter. So we've had 2 nights down, 2 more to go. We're going to hear from the vice president tonight. But you can really tell a lot by watching the speakers who the campaign is trying to reach, where they think there's some fertile ground for their reelection strategy. What have you learned?
Yes, Van, I think you're right. These first 2 nights have really been this sort of back and forth between those fiery speeches and trying to sell that softer version of the president, granting that pardon, hosting a naturalization ceremony for new citizens, all people of color. His kids speaking as well, the First Lady's empathetic remarks. The goal here to both energize the base, to bring back those disaffected Republicans who may have been turned off by President Trump, and to speak directly to those suburban voters, particularly women who polls show have increasingly flocked to Joe Biden. Tonight, as you know, we're going to hear from the Vice President, Mike Pence, the South Dakota Governor, Kristi Noem, and one of the president's fiercest defenders, Kellyanne Conway, just days before her departure from the White House. Savannah.
All right, Peter, thank you. And a reminder, we'll have more on the First Lady's message in our next half hour, and NBC's live coverage of the Republican National Convention continues tonight, and tomorrow we get started at 10 o'clock Eastern.
Overnight, protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin turning deadly. Authorities clearing the streets after reports of gunshots. Police say at least 2 people are dead, 1 person injured. Hours earlier, the governor had declared a state of emergency, mobilizing more National Guard members. But some protesters ignored a curfew, authorities deploying tear gas. This was the 3rd straight night of violent protests here, and this community is on edge.
This is pathetic. This is pathetic to happen in our country, and it's in the state of Wisconsin, and it's just anarchists going around and taking advantage of the situation.
The chaos came despite Jacob Blake's family pleading for peaceful protest.
He shot my son 7 times. 7 times. Like he didn't matter. But my son matters.
His family is now demanding the officers involved in Sunday's shooting captured on his cell phone video be fired and the one who shot Blake in the back be arrested. The eyewitness who shot the video says he heard officers yell, "Drop the knife," but police haven't said if they ever recovered a weapon.
He was not treated like a human that day. He was treated like some foreign object that didn't belong.
Blake's family now says the 29-year-old's spinal cord is severed and that he's paralyzed from the waist down, though doctors aren't sure it's permanent. Blake's mother tells us she'd last spoken to Jacob Sunday morning as he prepared to celebrate his son's 8th birthday. The boy was in the back seat when his father was shot.
When you first walked into that hospital room and you saw your son, what went through your head?
So many things. I was just so elated just simply being able to see him and he's alive.
The U.S. Department of Justice is now assisting state authorities with the investigation. Wisconsin's Department of Justice says the officers are on administrative leave and are fully cooperating. Kenosha police officers do not wear body cameras, but the Blake family wants any dash cam footage or any other video of the incident released.
Blake's family now plans to file a civil lawsuit. Now, over the last 3 days, the Kenosha Police Department has not commented, only to say that its officers were responding to a domestic incident. But again, 2 people dead, 1 person injured following another night of unrest here, Savannah.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez on a really devastating night there. Gabe, thank you.
You know, all of those experiences, I wouldn't change a thing. And I would tell listeners and viewers out there, it's okay to change your career. It's okay to change your map. It's okay.
This is a situation where the state continues to struggle to expand its testing capabilities.
Protesters feel that they need to come out in full force and support their community because they feel like they're not getting that support from the Portland police.
Another election day coming up against the backdrop of how to keep voters safe amid a pandemic.
The moment to truly understand who we are and who we say we are is right here at our feet.
You got to get a 4-year degree, but a 4-year degree is super expensive. We have created a system where the ticket to the middle class is a thing that middle-class families have to stress about and borrow for and patch together.
Why is this happening? With Chris Hayes. Subscribe now.
Today's headlines can be hard to understand, and a lot of kids have questions, so we started a newscast for them. We hope your family will watch Nightly News Kids Edition.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
But we actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
This morning across the country, what the new normal for schools will look like.
Many teachers left making tough choices between the job they love and their family.
What am I going to decide? Take care of my children or have a job?
That's an impossible decision.
You're creating a little community school. This is a moment where we can just develop ourselves and develop our community.
Let's turn it over to students. How do they really feel about returning to school?
What I miss is my teachers.
They are resilient.
A surge in coronavirus infections. New developments on several fronts. The story. Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
The news business is dynamic and probably has never been more important. With all that we're facing, I am so proud to bring the perspective of a Black woman, a daughter of immigrants, the wife and mother of a husband and kids who sadly are more vulnerable to police violence because of their color, a proud nerd, and a representative of the emerging America to cable TV news. I hope the great Gwen Ifill and my mom, Philomena Carolina, will look down from heaven and be proud.
Come and help protect Kenosha. Tuesday, we put up a fence around this building. All of you were allowed to come in through the gate. And the reason we put the fence around here is, like I said earlier, this is a focal point for protesting, and it still was last night. The protesters want to come here, say their piece, which is wonderful. No one in law enforcement, no one standing up for you today has any issues with peaceful groups coming in here and protesting. We support that. I know that about a month ago, the mayor and I went over to one, and we kneeled for the Kneel for 9 with the group of people that were there. We were there supporting. The fence that's around these buildings, what it actually allows us to do, because this building holds inmates, and if somehow this structure got caught on fire, we can't move these people that quickly to get them to a safe spot. We have to protect the inmates. And we put the fence up to help protect this campus. The first night there was probably about $300,000 damage to this campus alone. And what the fence also does is it allows us to take the resources we needed to protect it, to move them out into the field on the outside of the fence, and do an even better job of working with the people in our community. Last night, with the fence up, we were much more assertive in the way we handled things. Shortly after 8 o'clock, the curfew went into effect. At 8 o'clock, we moved out an armored car, and we basically said, you need to leave. Curfew's 8 o'clock. You're in violation of the curfew, and if you don't, we will be taken into custody. Then some left, several left. We watched on the screen, we watched several leaving. They followed the orders, and then we, when some didn't come, I don't know if I saw it live, but I don't know if you saw it, they started pelting the officers over the fence with stones and bricks, and the armored car was pelted. There were Molotov cocktails thrown. We gave them probably about another 10, 15 minutes, and then we did tear gas to help disperse the crowd. That was it's not something we wanted to do, but with the damage and the everything that went on Monday night, it was something we had to do. We had to disperse the crowd and get them moving out. The longer we let them go, the longer we let them build, the more dangerous the situation became. Tonight we're changing the curfew to 7 o'clock. We will gladly support all the peaceful protests that are really throughout Kenosha County up until 7 o'clock. And after that, we asked everybody to go home. Last night, I'm very proud of the people of Kenosha. Last night, when I moved from this building out to the command post, I drove down the streets and there was no one on it. The people of Kenosha let law enforcement and all our partners do our job. They let us do truthfully a much better job last night than we could do on Monday night. And the people stayed home. They moved their cars. They did everything we asked them to. And I want to thank the people of Kenosha for doing that. Tonight we're moving it to 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, the curfew will allow us to disperse whoever's gathered. Maybe there'll be no one, and I hope that's true, but disperse who's ever gathered in daylight. So it'll help us to be able to see better. It'll help the people to be able to see better. They won't be dispersing in dark. And we also find that after dark, we have many more issues with violence and things that go on. Last night during we had several hundred law enforcement, a few hundred National Guard, and again, I watched on TV, I watched these hundreds of law enforcement go out there and calmly go out there and first of all try to get people to leave, and then they assisted. Many were taken into custody, and for some it was truly just a curfew violation. But we're going to be very assertive in taking these people. If you don't follow the curfew, we're going to do our best to take you into custody for that violation. Wednesday, we have additional staffing coming. from around the state. Unbelievable the amount of sheriffs and police departments that come and have offered to come, both with equipment and people, to come down here and help protect Kenosha County. As the mayor said, we have got the National Guard, FBI, U.S. Marshal, DNR, Wisconsin State Patrol, all and agencies throughout the state helping to protect this city. Last night, every day we get better. In Kenosha, we are not accustomed to riots. We're not accustomed to it. We pulled resources, we pulled knowledge from federal and state agencies, and the cooperation between all of them have been incredible. There's some misinformation that, as the mayor pointed out, that the state isn't helping or the federal government isn't helping. Everyone's helping. Everyone is helping. Can all these different agencies round up the numbers we would have loved to have had on Monday night? They can't. They don't work like police agencies do. So with a few days' notice, these agencies were able to get more resources here. What we have been finding, and yesterday I did a couple of interviews, is social media. I don't do social media. I don't do Facebook. I think I'd be too upset all the time if I did it. But the one thing that we found is that we do get information from those sources, but there's also a lot of misinformation coming from those sources. Yesterday, as the day went on, it started off in the morning. There was almost no social media about anything happening yesterday, almost none. By noon, it had grown. By early afternoon, it had multiplied again. And some of the things is, all of you get, and the people of Kenosha get Facebook updates and social media updates from other people, and it gets passed and passed and passed. And we were getting the same misinformation on Facebook that, again, hundreds of times. We get the same thing, and they would actually even say, there's 30 vehicles at this location, and we'd send a squad car there, and there was no one there. So whoever's doing this put out this to scare the people of Kenosha. And it's working. It's working. What I want the people of Kenosha to know, though, is that we are working hard. We're working very hard, and we're getting better at this. And we've got more resources coming in. And we are not, like the mayor said too, we're not going to put up with what we saw Monday night. We're not going to. Does that mean we're going to stop it all? We aren't going to. It depends on numbers that come. We're not going to be able to stop it all, but we're going to be assertive in helping to protect the city of Kenosha and Kenosha County. And our neighbors from around the county, state, and country are here to help too. We blocked off the interstate, and we picked that up. Other larger cities did that, and it seemed effective. And when I talked to other agencies on the state and federal level, they seemed that worked. And it's an inconvenience for our local people. I am so sorry. Sorry that we did that, but there's a reason for it. It was to help protect you. Yesterday, I had a person call me and say, why don't you deputize citizens who have guns to come out and patrol the city of Kenosha? And I'm like, oh, hell no. And what happened last night, and I think Chief Miskinnis is going to talk about it, was probably the perfect reason why I wouldn't. Once I deputize somebody, they fall under the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin. They fall under the county of Kenosha. They fall under my guidance. They have to follow my policies. They have to follow my supervisors. They are a liability to me and the county and the state of Wisconsin. I don't know this for sure, but the incident that happened last night where 2 people lost their lives, I think they were part of this group that wanted me to deputize them. As a part of the county of Kenosha, that would have been, in reality, 2 deputy sheriffs who killed 2 people. It would have been one deputy sheriff who killed 2 people. Sorry about that. And the liability that goes with that would have been immense. So that's one of the things that was brought up to me, and I said, there's no way. There's no way that I would deputize people. One of the things that we had problems with last night is a lot of protesters come for the show. I mean, there's good protesters that come and pray and kneel and do all that stuff, and they chant, and I got no issue with that. I was doing it several weeks ago, and I'm good with that. But there are some, and we've got several that come here from outside Kenosha. They come from Illinois. They come from north of us. However, we've heard some people may have been arrested from Green Bay, Milwaukee. They're coming here. They have no desire to protest. And I go back to social media. One of the invitations looked like a party invitation, something you would get from your brother to come and see your niece's graduation or her birthday. Come, wear your black outfits, wear black masks, bring your backpacks filled with Molotov cocktails, rocks, and whatever else they may have in those backpacks. So that was the invitation that went out. And I think there's something going on tonight. I'm not exactly sure what it was. But I go back to, I think some people are thinking that I should deputize, we should have these people out there with guns under my authority. What a scary, scary thought that would be in my world. And part of the problem with this group is they create confrontation. The people walking around with guns, if I walk around with a uniform with a gun, all of you probably wouldn't be too intimidated by it because you're used to officers having guns. But if I put out my wife with an AR-15 or my brother with a shotgun or whatever it would be, walking through the streets, you guys would wonder what the heck is going on. That doesn't help us. We are set up. We're going to do the curfew until Sunday right now. It can change. This is all fluid. We're going to do the 7 p.m. curfew until Sunday. And it might continue afterwards. It might before. It is is this point, it's the interstate and east, a 7 p.m. curfew. For those that this puts a hardship on, I'm sorry. I really, really am. But it's something we have to do. I'm going to turn over to General Knapp right now and let him explain what from the National Guard.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sheriff. Hello, I'm Major General Paul Knapp, General for the state of Wisconsin in charge of emergency management for the state. Number one, I want to express my condolences to the families of those involved in the tragic events of Kenosha. Next, I want to talk about the Wisconsin National Guard and our role in supporting local authorities in Kenosha. On August 24th, Governor Evers called the Wisconsin National Guard to state active duty to serve in a supporting role and assist local law enforcement in preserving public safety and the ability of individuals to exercise their First Amendment rights to peacefully demonstrate. The Wisconsin National Guard is fully engaged to serve and protect the citizens of Wisconsin on this very important mission. For the last 2 nights, we've sent soldiers and airmen to support local law enforcement in the city of Kenosha in protecting lives and property. We are working diligently to provide additional assistance, and we're committed to meeting all the requests that we receive from civil authorities. The Wisconsin National Guard responds to formal requests from county emergency managers, and these requests are submitted to the State Emergency Operations Center. And then with the approval of the governor, National Guard resources can be committed to support civil authorities. The Wisconsin National Guard does not self-deploy and always serves in a supporting role. We don't choose on our own where or in what capacity to engage. However, these are fluid situations and we remain responsive to requests with the governor's approval. When arriving on scene, the National Guard plays a supporting role to the local law enforcement who remains in charge of the mission. Guard personnel will remain on mission in Kenosha for as long as civil authorities require our support. For operational security purposes, the Wisconsin National Guard will not discuss troop numbers as it relates to this mission. However, we are mobilizing additional forces in accordance with requests submitted by civil authorities from and through appropriate channels. At the direction of Governor Evers, we're also working together by Emergency Management Assistance Compact, otherwise known as an EMAC request, to bring in additional resources from surrounding states to augment the military police forces as needed. The events in Kenosha are tragic, and our thoughts and prayers to all those involved go out to all those involved. The members of the Wisconsin National Guard are proud to serve the citizens of this great state. We stand ready to continue to support assistance to local authorities in times of crisis. The bottom line is we're your neighbors, we're your citizens of Wisconsin. We care about what happens here and throughout the state, and we are here to support the local authorities in bringing this to a peaceful conclusion. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Kenosha Police Department Chief Dan Muskinis.
Good afternoon. You'll notice that there's a theme here in that there's concern for the public, for those that have been injured by the Kenosha Police Department, those injured by civilians, and the injuries inflicted upon the community itself by arsonists, Molotov cocktails, looting, all of the violence that goes on. So I want to be very clear with that. Everybody that stands before you is very committed to bringing a peaceful resolution to the issue at hand. We understand there are underlying issues that are driving this. We're not going to fix them overnight, but the commitment is here from the leaders here to do something about it. So with that, there's a clear understanding that Kenosha is full of good people. Kenosha is not a community of violent people. The residents here, they're scared, they're confused, but they're not violent. Peaceful protests are welcome. It is a way, it has always been a way for the American public to speak their mind. We support that. I support that as an individual. We cannot support violence. When the line of stating one's opinions to taking violent actions and hurting people, damaging property, and generally unruly behavior, that must stop. It not only is it bad for the community, it detracts from the message. The message here, the underlying message, is about racial tension and police violence. Whether or not that's a contributing factor, whether it is here in Kenosha and across the nation, those are issues that need to be worked on and addressed. When things become lost, it becomes all about violence. And that's clearly not what Kenosha is about. The people here are good people, and we're here to protect them. We've called in necessary resources to do that, and we will continue to do that, to stand strong to protect all people here in Kenosha. So by now, everybody is aware that the Kenosha Police Department, one of our officers shot an individual here in the city of Kenosha, which is for lack of a better term, the event that triggered the unrest. Thankfully, Mr. Blake is alive and recovering from that incident. I don't have a lot of great details about the incident because I wasn't there. The state of Wisconsin has a statute and a procedure that removes the law enforcement agency involved in the use of force from the investigation. So you heard Sheriff Beth speak about how they came in a supporting role. They controlled the scene to control evidence, to protect the scene, to make sure that justice would be served in the end. No matter what that evidence showed, that was his job. The Kenosha Police Department steps back from that, and we become the people investigated rather than those doing the investigation. That is a recent change statutorily here in Wisconsin, one that I support, and I believe it adds transparency and a greater oversight by some. Unfortunately, what that also brings is what you see before you today, a chief who doesn't have details about the incident. So the Wisconsin Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation, or DCI, is the investigating agency here. They are the ones who are collecting evidence, interviewing all those involved, whether it's the officer, Mr. Blake, witnesses, any host of things. They're the ones doing the investigation to give it that outside view, that outside demand for justice. So I support that, and we will continue to participate in that cooperation. They will continue doing what they need to do, but again, I don't have details to share because of the way the system works. The support process here with DCI for us is very limited. The Sheriff's Department controls the scene. I, as a chief, have policies. We have procedures to cooperate, and that is what we do. We're not hiding behind what has been referred to by some across this nation over the years as a blue line of silence. It doesn't exist. We don't want bad cops. There aren't cops here who want to go out and hurt people, right? So I understand that there's a difference of view, and there may be some underlying political issues that, again, as I said before, are not going to be solved. I ask for everybody in this room, everybody listening, and the citizens here that are affected to allow for time for that process to play out. The decisions in that case will be made based upon evidence collected by an outside agency presented to somebody else to make that decision. The Kenosha Police Department will not come out and make a ruling one way or the other in that. So that process is in place. I believe it's fair, and I believe it's a good thing for not only the citizens of Kenosha, but those across this nation. Since the incident, there have been peaceful protests and prayer vigils. There's a lot of good people out there, and there are a lot of good people who want to draw attention to underlying issues, to draw attention for the need for change, and to draw attention to the need for the potential for police reform, if necessary. And I bring that last statement into effect in that I think most people I've talked to believe that there may be the need for reform, but they're not racing to judgment. They will bring up ideas, and much of it is of what we've talked about or I've heard from citizens are at place. They do exist. There's just perhaps not enough communication. And today's meeting is somewhat about that. So you have my commitment that we will try to do our best to share more information. It's just difficult when you're removed from the process to do that. So I ask, again, as we move forward, today's theme is about progress toward restoring healing and having a community that comes out of this stronger. So over the last few days, Kenosha also experienced, unfortunately, looting, arson, Molotov cocktails, violence, persons injured. In addition, last night, in a situation that began peaceful and turned somewhat unruly, and the sheriff spoke about things that were thrown, hammers, bricks, violence toward law enforcement and for the National Guard who was assisting in controlling judgment, or controlling the scene here and protecting those who were rightfully speaking their mind. Persons who were out after the curfew became engaged in some type of disturbance, and persons were shot. Everybody involved was out after the curfew. I'm not going to make a great deal of that, but the point is the curfew's in place to protect. Had persons not been out involved in violation of that, perhaps the situation that unfolded would not have happened. So the last night, a 17-year-old individual from Antioch, Illinois, was involved in the use of firearms to resolve whatever conflict was in place. The result of it was 2 people.
NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
If they do go back to their jobs, they want to make sure that they are protected.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern. Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You're watching NBC News Now. Let's go to NBC News correspondent Savannah Sellers. She's got the very latest headlines for us from NBCnews.com. Savannah, what have you got today?
Hi, Allison. Just like we have the rest of this week, we're kicking it off with the Republican National Convention. It's day 3. Tonight, we'll hear from members of President Trump's inner circle, including Vice President Mike Pence, Senior Advisor Kellyanne Conway, and White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. Second Lady Karen Pence will also speak. She hinted at what she'll talk about earlier today.
I get to talk a little bit about our military community, and I know that you know that's near and dear to my heart, and I've worked a lot with military spouses to help them with employment, and I've also done a lot of work with veterans on preventing suicide. So it'll be an exciting night to highlight the heroes in this.
Now to a devastating milestone. An NBC News tally shows that more than 180,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus. The University of Washington predicts that number will grow to 300,000 by the end of this year. And if that's the case, COVID-19 will likely become the third leading cause of death in the United States. But as the death toll rises, researchers are working hard to create a coronavirus vaccine. Today, Moderna said they're witnessing promising results in a small trial with elderly patients. The biotech company says the patients produced COVID-19 antibodies, which some scientists believe is the key to immunity. But it's worth noting the study is still in the early stages and it hasn't been published in a peer-reviewed journal yet. Meanwhile, President Trump says he's sending the National Guard to Kenosha, Wisconsin to oversee protests that turned deadly overnight. At least 2 people were killed and 1 person was hurt after gunshots rang out during the unrest. Police say they've now arrested a 17-year-old in connection to last night's incident. Of course, these protests come after a video showing Kenosha police shooting 29-year-old Jacob Blake this past Sunday. Law enforcement says they were responding to a, quote, domestic incident, but they haven't given other details. In the meantime, the officers involved were placed on administrative leave. Now, turning to Davos, Switzerland, where the World Economic Forum's annual meeting is now postponed. The event was supposed to take place in January, but it's now delayed to summer 2021 due to coronavirus concerns. The summit typically hosts several global leaders. President Trump and climate activist Greta Thunberg were just some of the big names who spoke earlier this year. And finally, there's an update in the helicopter crash that killed Kobe Bryant and 8 others back in January. The helicopter company says was hit with multiple lawsuits following the crash, but now they're the ones taking action. Express Helicopters say they're suing the air traffic controllers working that day, arguing they are the ones at fault for making a series of errors. In response to the suit, an FAA spokesperson said the administration, quote, does not comment on pending litigation. That's something we will, of course, be keeping tabs on, Allison.
All right, Savannah, thank you so much. I know we'll see you in about another hour. Appreciate it.
See you then.
The National Hurricane Center issuing a serious warning for both Texas and Louisiana. Laura, now a powerful Category 4 hurricane, expected to bring unsurvivable storm surge. NBC News correspondent Chris Pallone is in Lafayette, Louisiana. Chris, how are things there right now, and how is Lafayette bracing for what's to come?
Hi, Allison. Yeah, the conditions are starting to deteriorate here in Lafayette, which is quite a bit inland compared to some of the coastal communities that will see the results of this storm first. But we are starting to see rain bands move into the area. Even in some parts of Louisiana inland, there have been tornado warnings already as these storms in the northeast quadrant often kick off what meteorologists would probably call weak tornadoes, but there have been tornado warnings already. The rain is starting to fall a little bit from one of these outer bands. The storm's still approximately 200 miles still offshore, expected to make landfall tonight near the Texas-Louisiana border.
All right, it looks like we lost Chris there. We'll try to get him back. In the meantime, Hurricane Laura has been getting stronger by the hour. As we've said, it is now officially a Category 4 storm with winds over 140 miles per hour. MSNBC meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins me now. Michelle, it is so wonderful to see you. It's been a while. Unfortunately, not great circumstances that we're talking to you under. Where is Storm Laura right now, and when is this Category 4 hurricane expected to make landfall?
Hi there, Allison. So good to see you. Yeah, and I do wish it was on better circumstances. We have a tough day, week, months ahead of us in some parts of the Gulf Coast states. Chris really did a good job letting you know what was happening right now in Louisiana. We are starting to see those outer rain bands. We do have tornado warnings. They are short-lived. That's what happens with these hurricanes. Unfortunately, this is going to happen overnight as well. So we are going to have a rough night ahead of us. Let's look at the latest of what's happening with the storm. We are looking at a Category 4 storm. So it is a huge storm, right? It's very strong, and we are looking at winds at 140 miles per hour. Right now, it's 190 miles southeast of Port Arthur, Texas, and it's moving northwest at 16 miles per hour. That's the only saving grace. It is moving quickly, but before it gets out of here, we are going to see a lot of destruction. So, Allison, you said it's storm surge, unsurvivable, catastrophic, life-threatening, destructive. These are not just words. These are expectations and predictions that we're going to see as we go through the next couple of days. So for the rest of the day, we are looking at Laura intensifying, approaching land. We're looking at dangerous rain bands. We're looking at wind gusts and storm surge, impacts to the coastline, impacts inland as well. So by Thursday, we will see it move inland. We're expecting Laura to make landfall overnight. Again, we could see tornadoes. We could see power outages for months and weeks. Then by Thursday, it moves inland. We're going to see heavy rains, still the threat of tornadoes and strong winds in the Mississippi River Valley, and still on Friday seeing the risk for tornadoes. A flood threat continues for the Ohio Valley, eventually impacting the Northeast by Tuesday. This is what the watches and warnings look like right now. Where you see the red, that's your hurricane warning. So Lake Charles, Lafayette, we're looking at Port Arthur, also Beaumont, some cities that really need to heed the warnings. If you have not heeded them yet, you need to heed them because your window is closing. We're also looking at tropical storm warnings stretching very far as well. So storm surge, we cannot say enough about this. This is the deadliest weather impact when it comes to hurricanes and storms. This is where we see the most catastrophic events. We see loss of life with this as well. So we are now looking at the potential of a 15 to 20 foot storm surge. When you think about that, that's 4 of me. I'm 5'3", so that would be 4 of me stacked on top of each other, and it's a deadly wall of water coming towards you. So it has immense power with this wall, and this storm surge could go 30 miles. I mean, that's almost hard to think of. So just putting it into perspective, that's all the way up to I-10. So what is storm surge? It really, in plain terms, is a deadly wall of water, and you really only need 3 feet of water to cause some light-threatening events. We're going to see up to 20 feet in some spots. So there's 3 feet, 6 feet. That's where you start to see the water breaking windows, water breaking doors, you know, kind of impacting some of the homes. And then by 9 feet, we could see entire neighborhoods being destroyed. And when we're talking about Laura, we could see some small towns being destroyed, not just neighborhoods. So we're certainly going to watch this. So that's one of it, storm surge. Now we have wind. We have hurricane force winds arriving tonight. We could see the winds all the way up to Lake Charles, in addition to that storm surge. So where you see the red, that's your hurricane storm, destructive winds kind of spanning out. And where you see the orange up to Shreveport even, you're seeing some tropical storm winds. We could see potential power outages. So where you see the red, that's extensive. Where you see the light red, that's widespread. We're talking days and even months in some spots. So we are in August, we are in a pandemic, and we're going to see power outages for months in some spots. 15 inches of rain locally through Lake Charles up to Shreveport, Little Rock. So this stretches even into the Tennessee Valley, the Mississippi Valley, and then potentially up to parts of the upper Mississippi Valley. So as we go throughout time here, we're going to watch that eye wall. This is what it's going to look at like at 4 o'clock. Look at that eye wall. When you have a very clear eye wall, that just means you have a strong storm. So Allison, think about this. We're in the home stretch, right? So we're going to see this landfall within the next 10 hours. As we're preparing for this, it's intensifying. It is possible we could see this as a Category 5 storm. But regardless, Category 4 storm, this is a historical storm. We are literally seeing history unfold in front of our eyes. And we're going to watch this very, very closely as we go throughout the next several days. I mean, I literally have chills as we talk about this. This is a tough one, and it's going to be tough for a lot of people along the Gulf Coast states.
Yeah, Michelle, the way you describe that storm surge, I mean, just thinking of what 4 of you stacked up, that's how high the water is going to be. Folks there are really in for a lot. Thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks, Allison.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
If they do go back to their jobs, they want to make sure that they are protected.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
Among the chaos, I found a father trying to teach his son about peace.
We don't have to retaliate with anger. We retaliate with love. That's why we're down here. There's always another way. So that's all I want them to see.
This is a situation where the state continues to struggle to expand its testing capabilities.
Protesters feel that they need to come out in full force and support their community because they feel like they're not getting that support from the Portland police.
Another election day coming up against the backdrop of how to keep voters safe amid a pandemic.
The moment to truly understand who we are and who we say we are is right here at our feet.
You got to get a four-year degree, but a four-year degree is super expensive. We have created a system where the ticket to the middle class is a thing that middle-class families have to stress about and borrow for and patch together.
Why is this happening? With Chris Hayes. Subscribe now.
Today's headlines can be hard to understand, and a lot of kids have questions, so we started a newscast for them. We hope your family will watch Nightly News Kids Edition.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
This morning across the country, what the new normal for schools will look like.
Many teachers left making tough choices between the job they love and their family.
What am I going to decide? Take care of my children or have a job?
That's an impossible decision.
You're creating a little community school. This is a moment where we can just develop ourselves and develop our community.
Let's turn it over to students. How do they really feel about returning to school?
What I miss is my teachers.
They are resilient.
A surge in coronavirus infections. Developments on several fronts.
The story.
Tonight, the U.S. shattering the record for most COVID cases in a single day.
From every angle.
What's your level of concern that the kids who have been told they're going to be home indefinitely won't be able to catch up?
On the ground.
Do you have faith that this is going to bring about change soon?
And in depth.
Here in Portland, more protests expected tonight.
Do you think that police in this country are under attack?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
The news business is dynamic and probably has never been more important. With all that we're facing, I am so proud to bring the perspective of a Black woman, a daughter of immigrants, the wife and mother of a husband and kids who sadly are more vulnerable to police violence because of their color, a proud nerd, and a representative of the emerging America to cable TV news. I hope the great Gwen Ifill and my mom, Philomena Carol Lamina, will look down from heaven and be proud.
The White House wants to restart coronavirus relief talks. Chief of Staff Mark Meadows saying his office has reached out to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to get those negotiations going again. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins me now. Leanne, what's the latest here? Has the Speaker responded?
It doesn't look like she has yet, and it doesn't look like they're taking this really as a serious offer anyway. So this is what the Speaker said about it today. She said, Democrats have compromised in these negotiations. We offered to come down $1 trillion if the White House would come up $1 trillion. We would welcome the White House back to the negotiating table, but they must meet us halfway. And that's from Speaker Pelosi's spokesperson, Drew Hamill. Another thing that senior Pelosi aide said is that, sure, Meadows' staff did call the Speaker's office yesterday, but they didn't ask to start talks again. They asked for the correct cell phone number of her chief of staff. So while Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, said that he has made another outreach to the Speaker, the Democrats aren't looking at this as something that is completely legitimate and an honest attempt to get back to the table, Allison.
Leanne, you have to have the right cell phone number to at least get things started. So we'll start there and see how things go. Would you mind reminding our viewers where right? Got to call the right number if you want the talks to start. Would you kindly remind our viewers where these talks left off? It's been a little while. What are some of the key issues that the White House and the Democrats are still having trouble agreeing on?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It has been a while. It's been almost 4 weeks now, I think, since people have not gotten their unemployment insurance benefit. And where they left out was hardly any progress being made on so many key issues, including this top price tag. The reason that's important is because if you can't agree on the top line number, then it's difficult to agree on all the details. The Democrats want to spend $3.4 trillion. That's their opening number. And then the Republicans, they want to spend $1 trillion. That's their opening number. And that's why you heard Speaker Pelosi say, once again, which has been her position for a few weeks now, if we come down $1 trillion, about 2.4, you guys come up $1 trillion, then they're at 2 trillion, and that's a good negotiating range. Here is Kevin Brady, top Republican on a key committee, and what he said on MSNBC today.
I was really disappointed that our small businesses, our unemployed workers were just ignored for Congress to rush back for a fake post office crisis that didn't exist.
So he mentioned some of the specific issues, again, the lack of unemployment insurance, people wanting these direct payments, small businesses need more help. Kids are going back to school all across the country. There needs to be more money for schools. States want more money to address the lack of funds they're receiving because of COVID. The list goes on, Allison, and it is a long list for them to come together, and they are not at the negotiating table.
All right, so Leanne, this is super premature because they're not even really talking yet. But let's just say negotiations restart. They reach a deal. What are you hearing about whether Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans will even approve it?
Yeah, well, Mitch McConnell is still trying to get the support of Senate Republicans on anything, something that he has not been able to do, even his $1 trillion bill that he floated he introduced, and then he floated a smaller bill just a week ago that's less than $1 trillion that is still unclear if he has the support of his Republican members. So you have these two levels here, Allison. While the administration is trying to negotiate with the Democrats, with the support of McConnell, actually, McConnell, on the other hand, is trying to corral his members and give them enough motivation to try to get on board and pressure the administration and put some pressure on both sides to get something done. But the political will at this moment doesn't quite seem to be there, Allison.
Leanne, we just need them to call the right phone and get things started. Seems like they haven't gotten much further than that. Leanne Caldwell, thank you so much. It's always great to have you on.
Thank you.
Vice President Mike Pence headlines night 3 of the Republican National Convention, addressing his party from historic Fort McHenry in Baltimore. It's the site that inspired the Star-Spangled Banner. NBC News political reporter Monica Alba is there. Monica, what can we expect to hear from the vice president at this historic site tonight?
Well, tonight's theme, Allison, is Land of Heroes. So you're going to have a focus on the military and on national security, we're told. And of course, the vice president will be making a lot of reference to the location of his speech, as you mentioned, this historic national monument and shrine, Fort McHenry, which will serve as quite the patriotic backdrop for his speech and his remarks. We're told the vice president is also going to be speaking to the national moment. He will be talking about not just his role as the chair of the coronavirus task force, but also struggles that the current country is going through, and then also how he is able to tout the accomplishments in their eyes of the Trump administration. He will speak to his partnership with the president, of course. And then we're also going to hear tonight from 2 White House officials that you could say raise some eyebrows in terms of how appropriate it is for them to be addressing the Republican National Convention, but both of them will be doing so in their personal capacity. And that's Counselor Kellyanne Conway, who's actually scheduled to leave the White House in this role next week, and the current press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, who was not on any of the original lists. We just learned about her addition to the schedule today. So that's some of the highlights and key things that we're looking for here in Baltimore, Allison.
The president will have an audience tonight. What do you know about the coronavirus precautions, rather? Will masks or social distancing be required? We didn't see much of that when the First Lady spoke at the White House yesterday.
Exactly, and we're learning a lot more about what health and safety protocols were put into place last night for that address from the Rose Garden. There were about 108 people in attendance, and we understand that only those who really interacted with the president, the first lady, the vice president, and the second lady were actually tested for coronavirus in advance of the speech. And now the reason that may be a little bit unusual is because you're having these larger crowds, again, these live audiences for these speeches come together while we still have a pandemic going on. So we're told they were screened in some ways, but the actual tests only applied to people who came into direct contact. So we've posed that question to the vice president's office about what they plan to do for tonight, where we expect as many as 130 or 140 people to be here at Fort McHenry behind me. The chairs, very much like what we saw last night, they're set apart, but they're not a quite full 6 feet apart. And yes, masks, we have asked whether those will be required, and we believe they will be strongly encouraged, but not something that's mandatory, just like what you saw last night, which not many people took them up on. So the coronavirus pandemic really hangs over all of the entirety of this speech. The fort has not been open to the public or the visitor center here for months because of the pandemic. So that just shows you how much this really touches all corners of this. But you also have here Fort McHenry, not a White House backdrop or location, which comes in contrast with last night, what we saw in terms of the Rose Garden, and tomorrow night, of course, on the South Lawn, when we expect the president to formally accept his renomination. Allison.
Monica, the White House has been under fire today for some unconventional moments during the RNC so far. Could you talk to us about what the issues are here and how the White House is defending itself?
Certainly, you have a lot of ethical considerations here, and a lot of those stem from the Hatch Act. And the problem, some critics might argue with that, is that they're not entirely enforceable when you violate those guidelines. People receive strongly worded letters, for example, when they do have a violation. Kellyanne Conway, for example, who we were just talking about, she on several occasions has done that by campaigning for the president, essentially, and not necessarily being clear that it was in her personal capacity or for other members of the administration. But what you saw last night was that video that was a naturalization ceremony that took place at the White House with the acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf. A lot of questions about why Marines were also featured in the video, some saying they were used as political props, but then also questions about why the White House has developed this strategy seemingly to sidestep the considerations, which is that they film the videos in advance, they put them publicly on YouTube, and then that way the campaign can sort of grab them and argue they're publicly available. That's why we can include them in the Republican National Convention. So the White House did put out a statement on this saying they believe everything was done properly, and they're claiming they are official events that were put on the schedule, and that's one of the ways they're trying to justify that, but certainly creating some controversy on the first couple of nights, Allison.
All right, Monica, I'm going to ask you some non-RNC related things. At least 20 million people are in Hurricane Laura's path, a big concern for the Gulf Coast tonight. What is President Trump saying about that storm threat today? Anything from the White House?
The president is closely monitoring the hurricane. We're told he's been briefed several times, and he tweeted earlier today about the concern, warning everybody really in its path to heed the directions of local officials and really evacuate if that is what is necessary. This is a very severe storm, Category 4, likely making landfall overnight. And we're told that as of now, there are no changes to the expected plans, either for the speech tonight from the vice president or the president's speech tomorrow night on the South Lawn. They will continue to monitor this situation. It's something we could hear them both talk about, or other speakers certainly may reference that, given it is on the top of so many minds today. But we're told for the time being, the plan stays the same while the White House continues to stay very, very close to this rapidly aggressive hurricane. Allison.
All right, Monica Alba in a beautifully green Fort McHenry, Baltimore. Thank you so much for being with us.
You got it.
Our special coverage of the third night of the Republican National Convention starts tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's with Chuck Todd. Then we'll have a network primetime special at 10 p.m. Eastern. You can watch it all right here on NBC News Now. In 2016, Circleville, Ohio overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump, who campaigned on reviving the local economy. But Circleville has lost hundreds of factory jobs since then. NBC News political reporter Vaughn Hilliard spoke to some of the city's still undecided voters.
I think there's so much, the protests and anger and dissatisfaction over so many things. I would very much like to see that go away, and I honestly don't think with Donald Trump as president for 4 more years it's going to, because he's going to be the same.
Now here in November, you have Joe Biden, Barack Obama's former vice president, versus Donald Trump.
That's a hard one. I'm hoping, I'm paying a lot more attention to both debates. I'm hoping that Trump will still keep the economy going like the things that he has brought to it. I'm open to see what Biden says. It's so early right now, I can't really say who I'm really swaying to or from.
I don't like some of the ways that he's presenting himself, but I always have that big word but. And then I look at what has happened and what he promised, and I can go right down the list. No need for me to do it. I won't remember them all. But he has done what he said he would do. With Donald, I think if he could just calm down his rhetoric, there would be no question as to how people would vote.
Vaughn is live now in Circleville. Vaughn, you spoke with voters there after the 2016 election and again this year. How have their political views changed?
Allison, let's work through this here. Why Circleville, Ohio? Why Pickaway County? I visited here just after the inauguration of Donald Trump back in February of 2017. And the very first place I went to was actually the Methodist Church right over our camera shot of our photog Paul Rigney. And I went in and listened to the service, and then some of the folks in the congregation welcomed me to Sunday school. And 12 out of the 13 in that Sunday school class spoke up and said that they voted for Donald Trump. And one of those was that very first woman you heard from, Linda Kennedy. At the time, she said that, in her way of phrasing it, was confessing to voting for Donald Trump for the first time. And she said when she cast that vote, she had questions about whether God was going to, quote, strike her down because she was so displeased with the way that the president or the then candidate conducted himself and spoke. But as you heard her say, she ended up voting for him. And he won this county by 42 percentage points. By comparison, Mitt Romney won it by just 19 percentage points. And that is why I wanted to come back here, because we focus a lot on those swing counties, ones that went for Obama, then for Trump, or those counties that saw a depressed turnout in more of those urban corridors. But you could make a case that it's places like Pickaway County, a town of 12,000 people, with the classic tale of 3 out of their 4 factories closing, losing hundreds of jobs, and folks hoping amid an opioid crisis that their community would be able to come back. That's why it was important to come back. And I'll note, when we're looking at polling, this is a place that is 95% white, this county. 85% of folks here do not have college educations. And so far, what we have seen are advances for Joe Biden among this particular demographic, closing that gap by 10 percentage points compared to where Hillary Clinton was at 4 years ago.
Vaughn, we just heard from some voters about the economy. What other issues will they be voting on come November? Have they sort of stacked them up for you in terms of what they are most concerned about and what may be the deciding thing that just sort of pushes them in with one ticket or the other?
That second woman you heard from was Megan Edgington. She's a mother of 3, born and raised here in Circleville. And she actually voted for Barack Obama. And then she was part of that jump of Trump support. Here she voted for Donald Trump. And she's now weighing which direction to go this time. The issue that she named was health care, particularly amid this pandemic, as a mother of 3 holding on to her job, trying to ensure that those in her community have health care. That's the issue where she says that she wants to better listen to debates. Of course, we can have a conversation about what those policies are. But the reality is that you have a likely voter here who is a little unclear about where the 2 candidates stand when it comes to health care. And that's why I think these debates will be significant, because there are still millions of voters that perhaps aren't following it like I am as a journalist every single day, but they want to better understand those policies. Linda Kennedy, she's actually a lifelong Republican. And she said the idea of voting for a Democrat is pretty crazy. She said that she appreciates that this conservative administration has brought on these conservatives like Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh onto the Supreme Court. At the same time, she is the grandmother now of 8 grandkids, and she said that she cannot bear to hear the way the president speaks about others, and she is frustrated by the, as she used the word, turmoil in the, quote, anger that she is seeing in communities like her own towards other Americans, and that's why she said right now she is leaning towards Joe Biden.
So, Vaughn, let me ask you this. I see that Biden for president sign behind you. You talk about some voters leaning for Biden. What do they like about the Biden-Harris ticket? What are some of their concerns with the Biden-Harris ticket?
You know, look, if you're the Democrats, they had more than 20 candidates up on that stage. And there were a great number of folks from within the Democratic Party that hoped to have Joe Biden walk away because they thought that he was the most palatable to places like this. Communities from the Midwest, 95% white, industrial, and Joe Biden is the nominee that they wound up with. And I've heard from folks who have suggested that Joe Biden is somebody who they think does understand the plight of the Midwest and some of the towns like this. At the same time, that third gentleman that you heard from, Jerry Lice, you know, when I talked to him, this is a man who also attended that Methodist church that Democrats hoped that they'd be able to pick off. Yet at the same time, he said that he believes that Joe Biden is going to be largely controlled by other factions of the Democratic Party, believing that there shouldn't be such issues as free college tuition, and that the Joe Biden is of the past is not the same Joe Biden within the current Democratic Party. At the same time, as you said it, there's a couple of these Joe Biden signs around. And while the Biden campaign doesn't necessarily look as Pickaway County as being the place where they're going to invest the resources, if they're able to chip off at least some of that support, I'll repeat it. Mitt Romney won it by 19 percentage points. And then 4 years later, Donald Trump won it by 42 percentage points. If they're able to chip into some of that support in places like here, that gives them a chance here in a place like Ohio, a place where Barack Obama won just 8 years ago. Allison.
Vaughn, thank you so much for giving us another slice, another view of how folks are feeling there in the Midwest. I know you've been traveling across the country so we can understand what voters are thinking ahead of November. Our big thanks to you and, of course, to Paul, too. Tell him we say hi.
Thanks, my friend.
How and when are you voting in the 2020 presidential election? It's more important than ever to understand your options. NBC has a great new tool to help you out. It's called Plan Your Vote, a state-by-state guide on voting rules, deadlines, and restrictions. Check it out at nbcnews.com/planyourvote. A suspect arrested in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Police there confirming that 2 people were killed, another seriously injured in a shooting at the protests last night. Just a warning, the footage you're about to see is disturbing. It shows a man sitting in the middle of the street waving a gun at people running by. No! Now, NBC News can't confirm what happened before or after that recording, or if this is, in fact, the weapon and the gunman responsible for the fatal shooting. Meanwhile, this afternoon, President Trump says he's sending federal law enforcement and the National Guard to Kenosha, Wisconsin to restore law and order. The president tweeting, "We will not stand for looting, arson, violence, and lawlessness on American streets." NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins me now from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Shaq, I know it has been a very busy day. Let's start with the suspected shooter. What do you know about that suspected shooter and what happened last night?
Well, we know that the suspected shooter is in custody. It's a 17-year-old from Antioch, Illinois, which is about 30 minutes from where we're standing right now in Kenosha. And they're not giving many details on what happened, what led to the shooting, the details surrounding it, but they're saying that the 2 people who he shot and killed, or who he's alleged of shooting and killing, are 26 years old and 36 years old. And we know that at least one other person was injured in that shooting last night. Police said last night that the shooting happened around 11:45 p.m. It happened after this park that I'm in right now. This is a place, it's been a flashpoint of protest since Sunday night. And after police cleared out this park and protesters and other people went into the different streets and different areas around here, that is when that shooting happened. There's lots of video out there that people have been piecing together, but they're not giving an official record of exactly what happened, but they are saying that he is in custody at this point. He will be charged, and court records show that he'll likely have a court hearing later this week. I believe it's on Friday. Allison?
All right, Shaq, we also know there was a press conference in Kenosha this afternoon. What did you hear there?
That's right, press conference that just wrapped up. And, you know, we learned a few different things related to the case. One thing in terms of the original shooting of Mr. Jacob Blake, the county or the police chief made very clear he would like to give more information, but it wasn't his department that did the investigating. In Wisconsin, when there's a police shooting, the custody of the crime scene is then shifted over to another department, and we know now that the state is handling the investigation right now. So the police chief said he just doesn't have any details about what the scene looked like and what the causes were. They didn't talk to the police officers because they wanted a separate investigation. But we also heard from the mayor and the county superintendent. Listen to what the mayor said at that press conference.
Violence in the community is not acceptable. Violence to property, violence to people, absolutely unacceptable. And it is up to us to make sure that that does not continue.
When you watch that press conference, they started with the turmoil here in Kenosha. They talked about a 7 p.m. curfew that is now into place. That's the third night of a curfew, and they're actually moving it up an hour.
Okay, y'all, thanks for still tuning in. Our podcast will begin probably the next 20 minutes or so. So please stay tuned.
Some clashes during the evening and that destruction and last night death that occurs at night. They want to avoid that and do what they can to avoid that, and that's what the officials announced earlier today. Allison?
All right, Shaq, let's take it back a little earlier today and talk about the president's tweets. He says he spoke with the governor who agreed to accept federal assistance. What else can you tell us about this incoming federal law enforcement?
Yeah, you know, there's some discrepancy over exactly what that tweet meant and exactly what is going to happen. And I'll tell you, we saw that tweet from the president, and minutes earlier we saw a statement from the governor saying that he was upping the amount of National Guardsmen he was sending to Kenosha. Yesterday, there were 250 Guard members in place. Today, it will be 500 members from the National Guard who will be here in this county. But the president saying that Tony Evers, the governor here, accepted his request to send federal assistance. There's some discrepancy because the governor's office is saying there hasn't been any accepting of federal resources. He increased the amount of National Guard and those troops involved. So there's some discrepancy, some uncertainty about what exactly was announced, what was announced by the president, and also what was announced by the governor. The governor's still saying, though, that with the influx in National Guard troops, they're hoping that can help both assist local law enforcement, but it can also help prevent some of the scenes that we saw both last night and the prior 3 nights. Allison?
Shaq, this, of course, is all happening because police shot Jacob Blake on Sunday. I can't let you go without asking, how is Blake doing today? What are we hearing about his condition? What are we hearing from his family?
Well, we heard from his family this morning, Allison. His family said he is in a lot of pain right now. They say he is doing better in terms of his overall condition, but they say he is not out of the woods just yet. His family yesterday had that press conference, very emotional press conference, where they went through and gave us a thorough account of his condition. They said he was shot at least 7 times, that he had a bullet lodged in his vertebrae, that he suffered kidney damage, liver damage, damage to his intestines. They made clear that he has a long road of recovery ahead of him. They said during that press conference that it would be a miracle if he is able to walk again. But then they also asked for the prayers of people here in Kenosha and people all across the country. They know the long road to recovery that he'll have to have, the many surgeries and procedures that he'll have to do, including as recently as yesterday when he had a spinal procedure. They know it's going to be a lot of work, a long recovery ahead, but they are asking for prayers and asking for people to continue thinking about him. And in doing that, they're calling for peace and for any protest in his name to be peaceful, because they want the focus to be on the underlying issue here. Allison?
Yeah. Well, Shaq, we know people around the country are absolutely praying for Jacob Blake to get better. Thank you so much for all of the updates today. A whole lot going on there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's working for the NBA and the NHL. So could a simple saliva test help colleges and universities tame outbreaks on their campuses? NBC News investigative and consumer correspondent Vicki Wynn shows us how this spit test works.
Across the country, schools reversing their decision to hold in-person classes after COVID-19 outbreaks. At UNC Chapel Hill, classes abruptly halted just days after move-in. Students there not tested before coming back. But at Purdue University in Indiana, an unprecedented undertaking. Before all 40,000 students start classes this month, they're required to take a COVID test.
Testing will be very, very important and will be a key element of protecting our college campuses.
But unlike most COVID testing that involves a large, often uncomfortable swab, to get a sample from the back of the nose, Purdue students will just spit into this tiny tube, something they can do at home with this kit.
The convenience of that. And so I think particularly for this generation of students was a good one that allowed us to reach them where they were.
Purdue is one of 65 schools working with Vault Health, formerly a men's health company, now offering this at-home COVID saliva test developed by Rutgers University.
Is the saliva test a game changer?
It is a game changer. First of all, it's a much easier test to administer. You're spitting into a tube, which just about everybody can do, even kids, and you're just giving us enough spit to be able to tell if there's a virus in there.
I ordered a kit from Vault's website. It arrived in 2 days.
I have my materials here. What do I do?
I set up a video chat with a clinician who made sure I did the test correctly.
I made sure to not eat, drink, or put anything in my mouth for 30 minutes.
So all you need to do now is go ahead and spit.
Oh man, this is gonna take a while.
I think the record was about 30 seconds.
I was not so speedy.
How many times a day do you have to watch people do this?
Enough.
2 minutes later.
Any tricks to this?
Yeah, smelling pickles in a jar, thinking about food, smelling citrus.
You should have told me to bring my pickles in a jar out sooner. I have nothing. All right, let me think about mouth-watering foods. I feel like it's working.
It took some time to work up about a spoonful of saliva.
Am I there?
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yes.
You're there.
A quick mix with the preservative to keep my sample fresh. Then I put it in a pre-addressed bag to be overnighted to the Rutgers lab in New Jersey. Vault says results are available in 2 to 3 days, a big advantage over swab tests that have seen delays up to 14 days. Vault's test is one of 2 strictly
Are you here?
tests given emergency authorization by the FDA.
Video?
University created the other one, but it's not an at-home test.
How is this test better than what we've been seeing with the nasal swab?
Well, the false negative rate is really what we're concerned with. Telling somebody that they're negative when actually they are sick is very dangerous. And so the saliva test has a 1% or even less than 1% false negative rate.
But scientists caution there's not enough data yet to know how much virus is in saliva.
They're generally very accurate. They're probably...
Okay, folks, so we're going to take out our background. You've been watching some of the NBC News live coverage of the of news of the day while we were waiting here. And we're going to be starting our podcast fairly shortly. How's it going, Nicole? Are you muted? Oh, wait, hang on. Wait, never mind.
Was easy.
I've heard like with the nose one, like it hurts. This was not painful at all.
And Vicki joins me now. Vicki, this test...
Okay, we should be good. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. The sound from the video capture card was taking out your sound. I have to cue something up here that we're going to talk about. So now I got to go back and find it. There we are.
Must be nice to be sitting on a beach there.
Yeah, right.
Trying to interfere in our election, but
okay. So we'll take that out. And let's see, what do we want here? Okay, we'll leave that here for right now. Yeah, that looks better, right?
It looks the same as it did.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just play the intro in a couple minutes, and then we'll get into stuff. Are you comfy?
Enough.
Okay.
Well, I'm sitting in a desk chair. I mean, how comfy is that? Unless you get one of those super ergonomically designed ones,
Yeah, like mine. Mine's pretty good. It's actually a gaming chair more than a desk chair, but it is what it is.
Well, we can't be all so fancy.
Okay. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to the What's Cooking podcast here from the Grill Online Radio live at 365. I'm journalist Charles W. Kim. I'm joined by journalist Nicole M. Wells. And I'm in the Sunshine State, as you can see behind me. Good weather here in Central Florida, in Orlando. And she's in Central New Jersey, which could get the remnants of Laura, which right now is a Category 4 catastrophic hurricane and is threatening the coast of Louisiana and Texas. How's it going, Nicole?
I'm really not liking this trend, Charlie. You are just seeming somehow magically to escape all of these hurricanes, and somehow they're just all drifting their way up the coast to us. I'm really not. I'm not okay with this trend. So you need to start doing your fair share. Okay.
You guys were supposed to get some pretty heavy weather there today, did you?
Not today. I think actually they were a day off because we got it yesterday. There were torrential downpours to the point where the conditions were almost like a whiteout, for a blizzard where you could barely see in front of you because it was coming down so hard with rain. So I think they were a day off. But, today is beautiful. I mean, today is absolutely gorgeous. It's like upper 80s, but you don't feel like it's upper 80s because there's no humidity, which for Jersey is amazing. So I'll take it any day of the week. So it's beautiful. I mean, it's blue sky, sunshine, no humidity, nice and warm. So yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be typical Jersey weather tomorrow, with the humidity returning, but today is gorgeous.
Okay, well let's get into our show. We have a lot to go over today. There's a lot going on in the world. There were 2 people dead last night in riots in Kenosha, where police shot a black man in the back 7 times. And that investigation has caused riots and protests in Wisconsin, Kenosha, Wisconsin. And as of last night, they imposed a curfew on the city. That didn't work out so well, and 2 people were shot dead. And during the protests after the curfew. We have the RNC, the Republican National Convention, going on. We have some stuff with that. And a couple other things that you may find amusing, enraging, or whatever as we discuss the news the last few days. And I will say, at the end of the show, if for some reason you decide you don't like us anymore, please feel free to unfriend us. Please feel free to not take part in our show. But I've had enough. And we'll get into that. Hey, Nicole, what we got?
So basically, as I'm sure you've heard, Bette Midler, the actress of, I'm going to say Hocus Pocus fame because that's how they're referring to her in articles, but obviously she's had a career that spanned decades. But Bette Midler was mocking First Lady Melania Trump's accent. She put out a tweet saying, "Oh God, she still hasn't learned how to speak English," which I mean is just amazing that you would even think to say something like that, especially because the First Lady is an immigrant, a legal immigrant that speaks 5 languages. I mean, that's historically ignorant of the facts, and just the audacity is amazing. It's just breathtaking because, I mean, as far as I know, and as far as most people know, Bette Midler speaks 1 language. So for her to come out and, denigrate someone who speaks 5, that takes a lot of nerve.
Very woke of her, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was getting called out for her wokeness, too. So, people like Piers Morgan, and as well as others were calling her out, saying, she's xenophobic, which is interesting seeing it turned around, on someone of the left. So, seeing as how usually the left is calling, the right xenophobic. So for people to be calling Bette Midler xenophobic and her being under fire for saying these things about the First Lady, that's pretty astonishing, I think.
It certainly is, and everybody jumps on President Trump for things he says or whatever, but they never want to hold themselves to the same standards of accountability because they hate the orange man so much. The First Lady gave, and I watched the speech last night, and yes, she has an accent, and yes, she does still have some issues with the English language, and she's not from here, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of people I've known throughout my life, even with more common or more related to English. For instance, Scotland, Ireland, with thick brogues, where they have trouble communicating at times. Let alone a totally foreign language. But look at how quick they are to criticize. They hate Trump. They hate the orange man so much that they attack his wife, an immigrant, for the way she speaks.
Yeah, who, by all accounts, she's the perfect candidate for being supported by these very people. She's an immigrant. She speaks multiple languages, which clearly, she's not, dull by any means. In order to speak 5 languages that, have different syntaxes and structures, and, that takes a lot of brain power. So she's clearly not, a stupid woman. So by all accounts, she should be, the poster child for the left for, look at what these immigrants can do when they come to America. But apparently not, because she's not of the right political persuasion.
Yeah. And that's where that's kind of where it is, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly where it is. It's to the point where, if you're not with us, you're against us. And there can be no dissent from the groupthink. And any dissent must be punished. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at.
Yeah, it's sad. It's very sad. There is something I want to do first, as far as something that I have, and I think it's an important story that's on here, and but you can't see it with my thing open. It's a St. Louis couple who were charged with waving guns at protesters in St. Louis. Now, these two people, Mark and Patricia McCloskey of St. Louis, on June 28th, there were protests in St. Louis, and a group of the Black Lives Matter protesters went through the iron gate of their gated community and were walking by their house chanting and doing their thing, and the couple came out with guns telling them to get off the private property. Well, depending on this couple also spoke at the RNC, at the Republican National Convention. So what turns around and happens is, and this apparently was published twice. It was published in July, and also again they redid it a few days ago when the couple spoke at the RNC or were scheduled to. What they did is the St. Louis Post-Dispatch does this extraordinary, investigative, long dive into this couple, who, by the way, are both attorneys.
And Democrats.
Well, whatever they are, they're attorneys. Whatever. It was interesting, they're Democrats with firearms, but that's fine. But they do this deep dive, as you can see here, probably a couple thousand words. And Nicole, you did investigative journalism, so you know how these things go.
Mm-hmm.
This deep dive. Guess what? Are you ready to clutch your pearls?
I'm ready.
Do you know what this couple of attorneys did?
What's that?
In the past?
What's that?
They filed lawsuits.
I'm sorry, speak up. Say it again.
They filed lawsuits.
Huh. Sounds like, something that just might be their everyday kind of thing.
No, you don't Nicole, you don't understand. They have a long history as attorneys of filing lawsuits for on personal matters. Kind of like journalists writing stories. Can you imagine?
You imagine if somebody did a deep dive on me? Ooh, they'd be coming up with all kinds of stories.
You mean you actually wrote stories in your past?
I have.
So whatever you do from this point on will be judged by the stories that you wrote in the past, right?
Well, evidently, if that's how we're doing things these days.
So, anyway, a friend of mine who happens to be a newspaper editor, and I'm not going to use names, but she is definitely to the left, and I've known for over 20 years, and consider myself a decent friend of, and we seem to get along. I've worked for her, which I'll mention a couple things in a minute. But she posted this story, which was a smear piece, and I'll say that it was a smear piece by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch because the couple was going to speak at the RNC on how horrible it is. They have a long history. They're attorneys, and they have a long history of not backing down. I don't know. It sounds like an infomercial to hire them. If I'm going to sue somebody, I want an attorney that's not going to back down.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
But so anyways, I put a snarky comment up on the Facebook. Being a member of the media, and this person, who used to be my editor, used to be my boss, she knows I'm a member of the media and have been for 20 years. I put up a snarky comment like, "Oh my God, they filed lawsuits." What a piece of it, I put in quotes, investigative journalism, unquote. So all of a sudden, this person responds to me, "I have no time for your ridiculousness," or something to that effect. And then bye-bye. And totally cut off the discussion on the post or whatever, because these folks on the left cannot handle having their opinions challenged without personally disparaging the person who challenges their opinions. And if you're from the right, you're evil, you're Hitler, you're god-awful, you should be dead. Now, let me tell you something. I have sat on a lot of information for the last 20 years. I've worked for several news organizations. And believe you me, I do not have a perfect life. I have struggled with plenty of things in my life, financially and otherwise, and I'm not perfect. And this person knows that. But I think it's truth be told, when you're talking about media bias, for instance, I was working for her for a publication in a northeastern state. There was a mayoral election when I started working at the newspaper we were part of, the citywide newspaper. And the challengers were a Democrat who was about 54 or so years old, who was fairly popular. He was a two-term incumbent. And he was pretty cozy. He would come into our newspaper office and sit and chat with our editor, for an hour or so on the regular. When I initially took over the beat for the city as a reporter for the city, I was basically told he was going to win. It was kind of a Hillary thing. He was going to win, hands down. His opponent, the Republican, was a 22-year-old who had just graduated from Marist University with a degree in political science. And he was not expected to do anything in the election. Maybe get like 1 or 2% of the vote. And this popular two-term incumbent Democrat, older guy, was expected to win hands down. The fact that a 22-year-old was running against him was a joke. It was something funny. It was the question was, not whether the Democrat was going to win, but by how much. Well, the Democrat lost the race by 214 votes, and the 22-year-old became the first and youngest mayor in the city's history. And at the time, like the second youngest mayor in the United States. So the story had some little national legs at the time. It was a major upset. Well, my editor, it came to light that this 22-year-old mayor, and by this point he was sworn in and was actually the mayor of the city. When he was in college, he had, at the time, a MySpace account. MySpace was a predecessor to Facebook. This is going back a decade or so. And what turned around and happened was he apparently had a name on MySpace which was similar to, if you remember Rob Schneider's film, Deuce Bigelow, Gigolo, whatever. And basically, I was under orders from my left-leaning editor to, quote, go out and find dirt, unquote, on him. Well, I wasn't able to. I mean, first of all, she was upset with me because I didn't see the point in doing a news story. Some others did, and then the story got some traction, so I understand they're being upset from the, I guess the number of clicks perspective. About him having this MySpace page, as 22-year-olds were pretty happy to do back at this point in time. And there was nothing on that MySpace page. I looked at it. I looked at the comments. He was a pretty good-looking guy, so a lot of young college ladies were really fawning all over him. To be expected, pretty normal stuff. But nothing sordid, out of inappropriate or anything like that. But because I chose not to write a story like that, I was castigated. Then we got rumors that this 22-year-old mayor had attended an underage drinking party in the city. Now, I should also tell you that a Democratic candidate for city council, the son of a former councilman and Board of Ed member, won the election at age 18. So he just was basically out of high school. And he won the seat as a city councilman. So anyway, there was this rumor going around that the mayor attended this underage drinking party at this home. I was able to find some folks who attended the party. And the mayor was nowhere to be found. No one remembered seeing him, that he wasn't there, or anything else. Well, my editor didn't like that piece of news, and she was even more upset to find out that the only person who could be identified for sure on the record as being there was the 18-year-old Democratic councilman who apparently had too many drinks and was jumping up and down saying, I'm a councilman, I'm a councilman, I'm a councilman. But my editor, fair-minded professional that she is, while she was ready to take down this 22-year-old mayor and show him for the despicable person he was, would not have anything about writing a story about the 18-year-old city councilman for attending that party. Personally, I don't think either story merited anything. But this is the same person who's now, so moral, on such moral high ground. During one particular meeting with those of us, with the reporters, and she was the managing editor for the paper with our staff, she castigated all of us. The same person who complains about Trump's bullying and all this, the same left-leaning editor turns around and says, I am smarter than all of you put together. That's what she says to her immediate employees. But Trump's a bully. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like somebody needs a giant, pat on the back or a hug. I mean, it's sad that it's so commonplace and standard. I think back when the episode you're referring to, Charlie, I think that hopefully it was more of the exception than the rule. Today, it's definitely more the rule than the exception, which is really frightening if you think about it, because these are the individuals that are shaping the news that is put out, that are shaping the perception that adults in this country, have. And seeing as how people's attention spans are shorter and shorter, and they need increasingly to be spoon-fed, more and more information, that is a frightening thing, that people who are so biased and so full of hatred for the other side are the ones who are just making the decisions about the content creation.
And these are supposed to be people who are credible, that you can believe. And I've always had a lot of respect for her and her work, and that's why I was happy to go to work for her. But the bias was there. This was under the Bush administration. And I happened to be, for instance, during my time in the city, I happened to be very lucky, and I got to cover former Democratic vice presidential candidate and U.S. Senator Joe Lieberman's independent run to reclaim his Senate seat after losing the Democratic primary. And he lost it because he had the audacity at the time, and we're talking 2005, 2006, he had the audacity to say that that the reason for the whole Iraq mishap and the misinformation was not the fault of the Bush administration. I mean, I sat down and had several beers with this guy, and we chatted and we chatted. Here's a guy who was in national security briefings, and basically what he told me, this is Senator Joe Lieberman, directly to my ears: Charlie, we, Hillary, the Democrats, Republicans, Bush, everybody got the same briefings from the military, from the CIA, NSA, whatever, from the military-industrial complex. They all said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and could use them against Israel, its neighbors, and us. And that's why we went into Iraq. And even now, everybody blames it on the Bush administration. Colin Powell and everybody else, they were all lying to go into war. And there may be a little bit of that. I'm sure President Bush, after Saddam Hussein threatened to kill his father, I'm sure President Bush wasn't too pleased with that. Somebody threatened to kill my father, and I was president of the United States. Yeah, I would do my best to make sure that did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a ruthless dictator from halfway around the world. That probably person would not be sucking air for too long. And before you go jumping down my pants for that, remember Barack Obama. No drama Obama. Executed through drones American citizens abroad without due process. With drone strikes. Remember that. But anyway, the point is that, I was being as fair as I could be. And there's no doubt that I lean right. I'm a Reagan Republican. My conversion happened between 1980, 1981, and 1984. And I've been there ever since. And I have been sitting back for so long now, kind of watching my tongue and not really saying what I've been feeling. And today, that ends. And I'm going to show you right now why today that ends. So hang on, let me pull this back up and get set up, because this is important. This is really, really important. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi this weekend stepped over a major, major line. And if you don't think so, you're not American. You should be out of this country. what she is about to say about the president, Republican members of Congress, specifically, and, quote, allies, which would be those of us who support our president, this is what she had to say about us. The third most powerful person in America. And all you Trump haters who, oh, he shouldn't say this, he shouldn't tweet that. Listen to what House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi has to say about Republicans and anyone on the right.
They're not the only ones. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with their allies in the Congress of the United States. But again, let's just get out there and mobilize, organize, and not let the president deter anybody from voting. And again, support the postal system, which is election central. They're doing everything they can. Suppress the vote with your actions, scare people, intimidate by saying law enforcement will be there, diminish the role of the postal system in all of this. It's really actually shameful. Enemies of the state.
So, Nicole, the old bat says we're enemies of the state.
Well, I imagine from her perspective we are. I mean, you know, I probably would be enraged too if, you know, I made my millions screwing the American taxpayer. And now someone's coming in who's trying to put a halt to all that. Yeah, I might be a little upset too. So, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being an enemy of the state. That's fine. I'm not.
You know, I am not. And I'll tell you why I'm not.
Well, let me finish because I had one more thing to say. I think that like Hillary's, you know, basket of deplorables comment, I think that this little designation will be rebranded and repurposed by the so-called enemies of the state, and it will be turned into a badge of honor because anyone who calls himself a deplorable now, it's a badge of honor. So I'm not too worried about it. But go ahead.
This woman, I mean, first of all, the first thing she says, oh, President Trump has called the media enemies of the state. Well, they're spreading misinformation. They're spreading misinformation that people use to base their opinions on.
Mm-hmm.
And the media is supposed to be spreading factual information. And they don't. They lie. Yeah, that is an enemy to democracy. And the media is not one person. The media is a group of corporations. There are like 6 corporations that own like 89% of all media in the United States. It was never supposed to be that way. It was never supposed to be that way. But by claiming that we are domestic enemies and that everybody, you know, whether you're a congressperson, a mayor, a police officer, whatever, you raise your hand and you do swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and protect it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those words are in there.
Mm-hmm.
So what Pelosi is calling for is she is calling basically for punitive measures to be taken against her political opponents under the guise of being domestic enemies. And we're not the ones running around setting fires to buildings, looting, shooting up people like they did last night in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
That would not be us. But this is what the third most powerful person in the United States said. That is a bit authoritarian, if you ask me. That's a bit like what Hitler said about other people in Nazi Germany. And Antifa certainly is filling the role of the fascist brown shirts and the violence that they did. When I look at the riots, how is that different from what the brown shirts and the Nazis did to the Jewish folks on Kristallnacht? The night of the broken glass, when they went to Jewish businesses in the cities and smashed them, smashed their windows. Just because you put anti in front of something doesn't mean you're against it. The anti-fascist, Antifa, is more fascist than any other organization you can think of.
I forget who said it, but there's a really good quote about anti-fascists. It might have been Reagan, but I'm not positive on that one. But basically it said, if fascism ever comes to America, it will come wrapped in the flag and carrying the cross. And that's basically where we're at. You have people who are very clearly demonstrating, fascist tactics and techniques that are wrapping themselves up, as anti-fascists, to try and score political points with voters. So it's kind of, I kind of think of that quote often these days. When you look at what's going on in the cities, you look at what's going on in the world, because that's where we're at in America. And whoever said that, I can't remember the quote's author, but they were 100% correct and on the money, because that's exactly where we're at.
And the thing is, you look it up in New York and New Jersey, you got Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Andrew Cuomo and Governors Andrew Cuomo and Phil Murphy.
Well, clearly Cuomo is the dominant in that relationship, because Phil follows everything Cuomo does.
These two are the most authoritarian folks you ever want to run into. Phil Murphy wants to arrest the owners of a gym, of a private membership gym, for conducting business.
Well, he has arrested them.
Yeah. Well, he has arrested them. He's fining them all kinds of money. But
they're smart, though.
They're smart because they're using the facility now as a political rallying place and volunteer location for a Republican senatorial candidate who's going up against Cory Booker.
Yep.
Because
as I said on
political rallies are protected.
As I said on Facebook, this, ladies and gentlemen of the state GOP, is how you fight. I know that most Jersey Republicans are not acquainted with how you fight and how you win, but this is how you fight. Please take note, recognize it for what it is, and try to replicate it across the state, because this is how you fight and this is how you win.
But also, let's not forget, during COVID-19, it was Murphy and Cuomo, respectively, in each of their states, that sent thousands of senior citizens to their deaths.
Yeah, they did.
Where is the outrage? Where's the media outrage on that? Where is the in-depth 2,000-word investigative report on the crimes against senior citizens these two Democratic governors committed? And why are they still walking around free after literally killing thousands of people? But Trump's the problem.
Well, sadly, there will never be any 2,000-word investigative pieces. Never will be.
Because the journalists have their heads up their asses.
Because it's not politically expedient. That is why. You will never have it, because it will never advance the agenda of the narrative that has been deemed the most virtuous amongst the media types, and that is why you will never have it. Sadly, that's the way it works. That's how the game is played.
Well, as of today, for all these reasons, and I think I could even document more if I really wanted to. If I wanted to bother to waste the time, But I'm telling you is that it is getting so bad. And this is why I think a lot of lifelong Democrats are walking away from the party. A lot of what they call classic liberals, folks who were like John Kennedy Democrats or Jimmy Carter Democrats even when I was growing up, are walking away from these lunatics. I mean, the dynamic, being my age, being 57, I've witnessed several presidents and I've seen several dynamics at play politically over the course of my life and political arguments and disagreements and whatnot. I've never seen anything like this. I have never seen such vitriol and you know, but people start throwing names around. You know, when you start calling Ben Shapiro an Orthodox religious Jew, a white supremacist, or a Nazi, and you call Candace Owens a young African-American female with conservative values, when you start calling her a white supremacist, you're messed up. But then again, we're talking about folks who can't even figure out a boy's a boy and a girl's a girl.
This is true.
This has gotten to the point of ridiculousness. Planned Parenthood, folks, read. I know it's not in fashion anymore. Don't just Google something. Read it, okay? Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was a eugenicist who wanted to eliminate minority races in America. That was her plan. We'll take away their babies. They can't populate that way.
Yeah.
And now she's some kind of hero to these morons for murdering babies? This is where we are now? This is good? Tearing apart an unborn baby inside the mother's belly? This is where we are, and calling ourselves enlightened? And these people think they're morally superior when they're condoning the murder of unborn children, tearing their little bodies apart? But we're the fascists. We're the bad guys. We're the Nazis. We have so lost our way. We are so doomed. If these idiots, these morons, these super educated, without the brains that God gave a soap dish, running things. And I, for one, have had it. What my friend did in disparaging me and just dismissing any, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you're a fucking idiot. Yeah. Because I disagree with your nonsense, as you put it. Because I have the wherewithal to disagree. And to have a strong opinion in the other direction, which I always thought was you know, kind of what we strive for in America to do. You can have strong opinions. I didn't know that was illegal. I don't know. I missed that memo when that came out. Did you get that memo?
No, I didn't get that one. I think a lot of people missed that one. But I think we were deliberately missed, quite honestly. It's like, you know, you go down and you drop, you know, invitations to the party to all your friends down the street, and you just kind of like miss the houses of the people you don't like. That was kind of what happened with us. But yeah, so I completely agree that, you know, polite discourse, especially of the political kind in America, is dead. It has been dead for at least 4 years, probably a bit longer, because I mean, everything takes a little while to get to a certain point. So probably a little while longer, but you know, I think that it definitely started during the Obama years, because basically Obama was kind of the divider in chief, you know, among...
Oh, you can't say that. Don't you dare say that about the Messiah.
Oh, I just did. Watch me go. This is not yet 1984. Will they'll take me away to the re-education camp, but I'm sure it's coming.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm starting to become of a mind where I think that there are some folks on the left who ought to be rounded up and taken to a re-education camp.
You know, I don't.
I'm turning into a Nazi, folks. This is how it happens. This is how it happens.
Can I get a word in edgewise?
Sure.
Thank you. I don't believe that anyone should be taken to a re-education camp. I think everyone should be allowed to believe whatever lunacy they decide they want to believe in. However, people's tolerance for other people is really what is lacking in America right now. Tolerance of someone else's opinion, and that it is not necessarily the same as yours, but just because it is not the same as yours, it does not make it inherently evil or bad or something that must be eliminated. So I think that kind of thinking doesn't really do us any favors. It only furthers the problem, in my opinion. And it gets us, it keeps us going down the road to eventually there is no point of return. We may be there already, I don't know, but I think that really doesn't help us.
I literally am starting to be of the opinion that, and the thing, and what bothers me the most about Kenosha last night, and we are going to show in the second half of this, maybe what we ought to do now, we've been going for about 40 minutes, we should take a break to put our sponsorship segment into the show. If you're watching on YouTube, please keep watching. This will only take a couple seconds in the video. It'll be broken up with on the audio podcast with our sponsorship. And then when we come back, we're going to take a look at a video that led to, from Kenosha, of a man who was shot 7 times in the back, an African-American man, by white police officers. He was shot 7 times in the back. He's surviving, but maybe paralyzed. And there's investigations going on, and Kenosha came unglued with riots and things. And as of last night, there were shots fired after a city-imposed curfew, and people have died. 2 people died. But let's take a break. We'll get our sponsorship break in, and then we'll be right back.
Online all the time. The Grill Online Radio, a charcoal media station. Bookmark it today.
Okay, we're back with our second half of What's Cooking? Grill Online Radio, live 365. I'm journalist Charles W. Kim, and I'm joined by journalist Nicole M. Wells. I'm coming to you from the Sunshine State in Central Florida, and she's coming to you from Central Jersey, the great Garden State up north. Not so great these days, though, is it, Nicole?
No, it's pretty much, the fascist state. If we really want to be real about it. Yeah, it's just kind of a disaster up here. You probably have it a lot better down there in Florida. But up here, it's you get arrested for going to church or opening your business. But rioting and protesting, that's all good. So it's kind of the land of backwardness right now. Hopefully that'll pass. And we'll send this carpetbagger packing. But yeah.
We've talked about Cuomo and Murphy, during COVID, sending seniors to their deaths in nursing homes by mandating that the nursing homes, who were not necessarily equipped to handle the pandemic, had to take these patients back in.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no investigation of this wanton murder of senior citizens by the thousands.
No, there is none.
At least several thousand of the deaths in New York and New Jersey can be attributed to senior citizens. Some say. And in both states, I think we're like 50 or 60,000 people dead in both states. as much as 46% of those who died from the pandemic in the two states during the hotspot phase of this were senior citizens.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, whatever, health department or, epidemiologist official told him, Cuomo, or told Murphy this was a good idea, they should be fired on the spot. Somebody's head should roll for this, for all of those families that lost their loved ones and weren't even allowed to see them. Somebody's head should definitely roll, but it won't. It won't, because, like I said before, it's not politically expedient. So nothing will happen. Life will carry on, and justice will not be served. And that's the New York and New Jersey way, unfortunately.
Now, this video that we're going to show is disturbing. And it's only, I want to really emphasize this, that this is only a small piece of the entire incident that was taking place. But this was a cell phone video taken of a man in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Jacob Blake, and we'll just do it and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So, because of that incident, which clearly shows the police having, the white officers having an African American man at point blank range at gunpoint and firing 7 shots to him while his back was turned. I mean, that's what it is. The big question, apparently, I listened to a press conference today where the chief of police said, hey, look, in Wisconsin, first of all, this will be looked at not by the internal affairs of the city police, but will be looked at by independent organizations. There's talk that the federal department, U.S. Department of Justice, and FBI will also be involved in determining what happened. The officers involved are on administrative leave, and more information about the case is not forthcoming at this moment because the active investigation, or what the larger incident was, a domestic violence call police were called to, and this is how it ended. And Kenosha, over the last several nights, has erupted in violence. The man who was shot in the back, Jacob Blake, is expected so far to survive, but will likely be paralyzed for the rest of his life. His attorneys have already filed notice that they will sue the city. That's what we know. During the unrest, the National Guard was called in, fires were set, all kinds of things going on as far as rioting and things. National Guard was called in last night. The city imposed a curfew as of 7 p.m. As the things got dark and crowds were still around, the police tried to enforce the curfew. The police were not involved, but while they were trying to clear things out, a disturbance of some kind erupted amongst the people who were out and about. It's not clear yet whether who was protester, who was maybe a not protester, or whether they were all protesters, but a disturbance broke out. Shots were fired. 26-year-old and 36-year-old, two men, 26 and 36, were killed. Police have not yet released further details on their identification. And another person was injured. They don't know yet how many shooters were involved, that's all being investigated at this point. But the question I have after watching that video is why this man, Jacob Blake, did not comply with police officers when they had him at gunpoint. He just walked away from them, just kept walking. As a reasonable person, and they take away anything else, what do you think is going to happen?
A lot of times with cases like that, people, are high on drugs. They're on, serious mind altering drugs, and they're not thinking. They have absolutely no conception of consequence. A lot of these drugs are incredibly powerful, and they mess with your mind in a profound way.
We do have to say this is all speculation. We do not know any of whether he was on anything or anything. We don't know any of that.
In this case, as I was going to say, we don't know whether he was on anything or not. I'm merely saying that in a lot of these similar type cases, people are on drugs and they don't have any understanding of consequence. What is going to happen if you do not comply with what is being told to you? There is no understanding of that if you're on these mind altering drugs. So again, I mean, we have no idea in this case whether that's the case or not. But if that is the case, it's just a sad situation. I mean, it's a sad situation all around, but it's even more sad. I think if the understanding isn't there of what's going to happen.
Well, let's just. But just for the sake of discussion, and we are all speculating. No one knows right now anything concrete about this situation. The video looks horrible.
Mm-hmm.
The video looks horrible, no doubt about it. The question I have, though, is what person, forget drugs, just let's go with a reasonable, fairly sober person. There's a certain point during any situation with police officers when they have their weapons drawn and pointed at you. Even the most anti-police person in the world, usually that's when it ends. The hands go up and they comply.
Yeah, usually.
I mean, tasers are one thing, pepper spray is something else. But when the officers have their firearm pointed at you from about a foot away, and yet you just walk away from them?
Mm-hmm.
The question in my mind is, what was he thinking did he think because of the current climate that the officers were restrained from shooting him?
Well, he might have, because a lot of police departments, like bigger ones like New York, Philly, weeks ago when the riots broke out, their hands were kind of tied because they were given stand down orders. They were given, orders not to interfere, with the rioting, with the protesting, whatever you want to call it. They were told stand down. And a lot of these officers too, are afraid for their jobs. They're afraid that they will be villainized. They're afraid that they will lose their job. They will be dragged through the mud, and there will be no one to stand up for them. So a lot of them, have come out and said, I'm going to look the other way, and I'm just going to, I'm not going to use that force that is appropriate in this case, but I'm not going to use it because what's going to happen to me and my family if I do. So yeah, and that might have been what this guy was thinking, that these officers aren't going to use that kind of force because, it doesn't look good if they do.
It's just amazing to me when you watch how almost, I don't even know what the word is. I mean, he just continues to walk around the front of the car and tries to get into it. With the police, one of the officers has his shirt in his hand.
Maybe the word you're looking for is cavalierly. Cavalierly walks around.
I thought of that word, but it was almost more routine. Like, he was walking obviously toward the truck with a purpose, but it didn't seem like he had any sense of of the danger, understanding of how dangerous the situation he was actually in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it almost seems like, oh, okay, let me just go get my sunglasses out of the front seat of the truck. Kind of action.
Nonchalant.
Yeah, nonchalant. I think that's better than cavalier.
Okay. Again, I mean, we have no idea, if this guy was on something that altered his understanding of reality. Who knows? Who knows what'll come out in this investigation?
Or if he didn't, I mean, we don't know.
Yeah. If he didn't, then that's something else.
During the press conference, apparently there were reports that some folks, the police were telling him to drop a knife. We don't know if he had one in his hand. It doesn't appear in the video that he has anything in his hand. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's certainly, given the national climate, this incident certainly is not helping the situation much.
No, it's not. Situations like this do nothing to kind of calm things down.
And then there's the question. Okay, if it was a situation where, let's say, the officers needed or should have shot.
Mm-hmm.
7 times in the back. 7 times.
That seems a little excessive. I mean, you would think after, 2, maybe max 3 shots, the suspect would be neutralized and the threat would no longer be there. So 7 times seems a little much to me.
Yeah, and I mean, again, the officer is, the firearm is within a foot of this guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he's shooting while the guy's running down the street and has to put, 7, 8, 10 rounds to try to neutralize him or bring him down.
Exactly.
From that range, 1 or 2 shots should be able to do it. Or stop any threat that he might possibly pose.
Exactly.
But, also, as one police officer said who had been in these situations, you're in that situation, shots are being fired, your adrenaline, everything's pumping up.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
And again, I mean, we weren't there, so we have no idea, what the actual situation was that these officers faced. That in combination with their adrenaline, in combination with whatever they determined, the suspect was doing that was threatening, all of these things, we weren't there to witness or we're not privy to that information. So, it's kind of hard to say at this point who was wrong and who was right. But it's just a sad situation all around because either way, in this current situation or this current climate, it's going to be a nightmare. I mean, these guys, whether they were wrong or they were right, justified or not, they're going to be villainized either way. And it's just, and this guy is going to be, paralyzed for the rest of his life. It's just sad for everyone involved.
Well, it's like I had to cover a hostage situation. Oh, by the way, the picture that you're seeing on your screen, for those of you watching on YouTube, the screen is now Hurricane Category 4. It's supposed to get up to a Category 4 Laura as it approaches the Louisiana-Texas coastline. So that's what the image you're seeing. What's behind me is a very sunny, beautiful palm tree background image provided by Zoom, who we're using to make this podcast happen between New Jersey and Florida. But the grayer picture on the right is the live, the hurricane coming into Louisiana, just so you know. Which then we got a Category 4 coming into Louisiana. We had a smaller storm hit a couple days ago. And now we hear that there may even be an asteroid of about 7 feet heading toward the Earth that could strike the Earth around the day before the election.
I saw a funny meme on Facebook, and it was kind of set up like the graphic was kind of like a campaign image almost, and it said it was like a slogan for 2020, and it said 2020 just ended already.
Yeah, I see. I was like,
yeah, and it was like a picture of the asteroid coming towards Earth. But I mean, something that size, I don't think would survive through the atmosphere. I think it would burn up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, but yeah,
I mean, Go ahead.
You also have to remember, but it's the speed that it's also coming in at. It may make it through the atmosphere just because it's moving so fast.
Well, even if it does, I mean, something that size, it's not going to be, this huge cataclysmic event. I'm sure a lot of people at this point were wishing it was, like just end it already because they're so sick of 2020. But yeah, I don't see it as posing a huge threat. I mean, the timing is just perfect. I mean, it's really like God laughing. So.
Yeah, well, why don't you just send us a message with this asteroid? Have it come through the atmosphere, and whoever it hits closest to, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, will vote for the opposite.
There you go. That's one way of doing it.
So if President Trump is really the Hitler, the evil Antichrist that everybody thinks he is, or that folks on the left think he is, let it hit the White House. If, on the other hand, that's not the case, then we don't really need Wilmington, Delaware.
Yeah, but man, I'm a little close to Wilmington, so I mean, can we have it hit somewhere else in the world, like China, and just take somebody out in China, like one of the Communist Party leaders?
No, because that wouldn't really answer our question. We're asking for divine intervention to answer our question.
We don't need to answer the question. Everybody can discern for themselves, and if they're not intelligent enough to do that, then they deserve whatever's coming to them.
I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so what else you got, Nicole?
My reflections were strictly on the RNC. I think that it's that from the speakers I've seen, they've been very eloquent, and it's just been really a showcase of the American people. It's not so much this celebrity surrogacy for political candidates, this star-studded affair. It's more your average kind of people, from all walks of industry and life, just kind of talking about, what this administration has done for them, and why, it deserves another 4 years. I believe it was the Kentucky Attorney General, who was on, I don't remember his name offhand, but he was speaking last night, and he was saying, that he was addressing former Vice President Joe Biden directly, and he was saying, Joe Biden's saying, because this gentleman is Black, and he was saying, Joe Biden's saying that if, I ain't Black, if I don't vote for him, well, excuse me, Mr. Vice President, but I am Black, and I'm voting for Donald Trump, for X, Y, and Z reasons. And he was a very powerful speaker. I thought he was great. So it's really been a very down to earth kind of convention from what I've seen. And Melania, First Lady Melania Trump, she spoke very well, despite Bette Midler and her, her denigrating her. But I think it's really quite a nice convention. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
So far from what I've seen, well, the media is, there's so much lies and all. Man, did you watch the Democrat convention?
I only could stomach bits of it.
You talk about nights of total BS. But the media doesn't bother to call them out when they lie because they're all part of it, and they help perpetuate the lies. Because they're dishonest, unethical pieces of excrement.
Well, I read somewhere, it was today actually, I read somewhere that the fact checkers, I think it was at CNN, the fact checkers, but I'm not positive on that. Don't quote me. But fact checkers at some news organization were fact checking the Republican National Convention because there are clearly lies and misinformation there. But the Democratic National Convention, that did not need to be fact checked because there were no lies or misinformation.
Oh, of course not.
It was
Joe Biden gave the speech of his life that he plagiarized from himself.
I was going to say if he could remember it. But it was quite amusing to read that. I was like, wow, this is a breathtaking piece of nonsense that somebody took the time to write.
Yeah, I mean, that goes right to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
this need. Oh, we're going to fact check everything every politician on the right says, but we're not going to fact check squat on the left.
Yep.
Because we're always telling the truth, because we're all morally and ethically so superior.
They're virtuous, don't you know? I mean, nobody on the right can be virtuous. We're just the common dregs of society. The left, however, are paragons of virtue as they, look down on us from their ivory towers.
They're overeducated imbeciles is what they are. Overeducated imbeciles.
Obviously, you were not reading into my sarcasm. But you just need to take a minute and let it sink in. But yeah, I agree with that sentiment. But yeah, so that's apparently why fact checkers are needed for the right and not for the left.
Yeah, well, apparently, I just, after watching the Democratic convention and listening to the nonsense that they just spouted, that Donald Trump, look, guys, I've seen presidents from, well, Kennedy was killed when I was 11 months old. But Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, Obama, Trump. That's what, 10? Nobody has run the country into the ground yet. We're still here. We're still here. The swastikas have not taken to the streets. The sickle and whatever have not taken to the streets yet. And it's just nonsense. But I will tell you this. This time around, because of what has happened, especially in the last year, there are reasons why reasonable Democrats are walking away from the party. There are reasons, good reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's from Georgia, the Georgia representative Vernon Jones, who is he's a registered Democrat and he's a Democratic representative for his state, but he is supportive of Trump and he spoke for Trump at, I believe it was the first night of the RNC, and he said, I didn't leave the party left me.
That's how many of them feel. Many of them feel.
Yep. And I mean, with the walk away movement, I don't know if you're familiar with that, Charlie, but Brandon Straka.
By the way, it's Brandon Struck. He was on with Tim Pool the other night during the Timcast IRL podcast, and he says it drives him nuts because there's an A on the end of his name, but you never pronounce it.
Oh, well, okay. Regardless, I follow him on Twitter, and not so much on Facebook, but on Twitter. And he's always entertaining, and he just is, traveling the country and just, mobilizing all these frustrated Democrats who feel like they don't have a party anymore. And he's encouraging them to walk away from the party because, the party left them a long time ago.
Yeah, he just had an event in Philly 2 days ago.
Yeah.
That's why he was in South Jersey doing Tim Pool's show.
Yeah, I would have liked to have gone, but I'm not really comfortable enough to go to Philly by myself, so that wouldn't have really worked.
Okay. Okay. So that's all I got. I think we could probably wrap this week up.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good recap of the current state of madness that we find ourselves in, and I'm sure it'll just get madder and madder as we go on and hurtle toward the election. So it'll be a fun time.
So make sure if you're on the Louisiana or Texas coast and you're tuning in, make sure you're taking the proper precautions. This is a Category 4 storm, which is labeled catastrophic, potentially catastrophic. So, when you're told to leave, please evacuate, be safe, be careful.
The storm surge is said to be almost unsurvivable if it does what they're thinking it's going to do. So yes, please get out.
Yeah, so something like 15 feet or something like that.
yeah, it's supposed to be unsurvivable. So don't stay, but for any reason.
Okay, so be careful out there. And for those of you in the rest of the country, try to hold it together. If you've had enough, don't be scared to speak your mind. I've waited too long. And from now on, this show will not hold back its punches. I'm not going to pander to anybody. Right is right, wrong is wrong. I'm sorry, but it is. And we have to start living that way. Maybe we can make this all a better place if we do. What do you think, Nicole?
Might be able to. I mean, it worked for a long time. We just got to remember how to get back there. That's all.
Okay, so from this end of things, journalist Charles W. Kim, journalist Nicole M. Wells. This is What's Cooking on the Grill online radio at Live 365. We'll be back again next week with another episode. We'll discuss the current event topics of the day. Remember, if you see us or if you hear us, support us over at Anchor FM for our audio version of the podcast, and on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join us. And we'll see you next time. And for those of you watching on